Have you ever spent the night alone in an old roadside motel, where the only sounds are midnight knocks on the door, a strange blue glow slipping in through the cracks, and the creeping feeling that someone is watching you from the shadows? Tonight, I'll share with you 3 terrifying true stories that took place in forgotten motels along empty highways, places where weary travelers stopped for one night, only to come face to face with something far worse than a nightmare. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and make sure you're somewhere safe, because after this, you may never want to sleep in a strange motel again. Story 1. The Man at the Window. I was on a solo cross-state drive when a sudden rainstorm hit and sleepiness rolled in like a heavy fog. It was close to midnight, so I pulled off the highway and into a small town in Ohio called Xenia, hoping to find a place to crash for the night. Google Maps pointed me toward a place called Xenia Country Inn. The whole town looked like it had been stuck in the 1970s, dusty, damp, and strangely lifeless. But I was too tired to be picky. At the front desk, an old man sat reading a newspaper. He didn't even glance at me. When I asked for a room, he muttered, 65. No greeting, no smile. I handed him my card. He swiped it, then tossed me a rusty key attached to a plain plastic tag. No number, no logo, nothing. I dragged my suitcase through a nearly empty parking lot. Only 2 cars sat there abandoned, looking as if no one had touched them in weeks. The key took forever to work. I had to twist and jiggle it before the door finally gave in. A wave of damp, moldy air hit me, mixed with something else, like dried vomit. I flipped on the lights. The room was small, the carpet a faded green. The bed creaked like it was in pain as I laid down. I tried the TV. The remote didn't work. Not that I was in the mood to watch anything anyway. I drifted into a shallow sleep, until a loud knock against the window jolted me upright. A man was standing there, staring at me through the fogged-up glass. He knocked again, then spoke, his voice pained and pleading. "Hey, please. I'm hurt. I need help. Please." He definitely saw me. I sat frozen on the bed, my heart thudding. Something about his voice was off. There was no panic, no real urgency. It felt fake. I shouted, telling him to go to the front desk. He didn't move. He just stood there whispering, knocking sometimes, tilting his head, like he was studying me. Eventually, after what felt like forever, he backed away. I crept to the door, checked the lock, then pulled on it with all my strength to make sure it wouldn't budge. It held even though there was no secondary latch. I shut the curtains tight, buried myself under the blanket. Eventually, I dozed off again. But my dreams were broken strange. An abandoned supermarket. A garbled speaker system. The click-click of locks trying to open. I woke up with a start. The room was unnaturally cold. I looked down and realized my blanket had been pulled off. I sat up to pull it back, and my eyes drifted to the end of the bed. My heart nearly stopped. A dark, towering figure stood there. Still. Silent. I opened my mouth to scream, but he raised a finger to his lips and hissed, "Shh! Don't move. I won't hurt you, if you stay quiet." Then he asked, "Where's your wallet?" I pointed to my jeans on the floor. He walked over, reached in, pulled out the wallet. Then he asked, "Anything else?" I shook my head, throat dry. He stared at me for a few more seconds, then walked out. Quiet. Like smoke. I scrambled out of bed, wrestled with the cursed lock. Finally got the door open and ran out into the pouring rain, dialing 911 with shaking hands. The front desk camera didn't catch his face. He wore a cap and a mask. But he had been there, and he knew which room I was in. I canceled all my cards, changed my account info, and that night I slept in my car in the middle of the storm. but it was still better than staying in that room. Since that night, I always check the windows before sleeping in a motel. And I never ever forget the look in his eyes behind that fogged-up glass. Story 2. Room 6 by the deserted lake. My dad and I were in a small coastal town recently hit by floods, volunteering with a truckload of donated supplies. We planned to stay just one night. The first night at a beachside hotel was perfectly pleasant. But for the second night, my mom booked us into a small motel by a lake the hotel had run out of rooms. She said there was no other option, and I wish she'd found one. The motel sat right next to a trailer park and was surrounded by thick, overgrown woods. It looked abandoned, like time had forgotten it. The owners were an elderly couple. The wife seemed kind enough, but the husband looked like he had walked straight out of a slasher film. Silent, jet black eyes, and a face as cold and wrinkled as stone. We were given room 6 facing a dried-out lake, now just cracked earth and mist. That evening we had pizza and stayed out as late as we could. But when we returned, we noticed a small bag of children's clothes stuffed under the rear tire of our truck. My dad thought maybe it was misplaced and offered to bring it over to the trailer park. When we mentioned it to the motel owner, his face immediately changed. His eyes widened, and he shook his head violently. No one goes over there. Not ever. Then he turned and walked away without another word. That night I struggled to sleep. Motorcycles kept racing up and down the gravel road. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my father snoring. And something else. A whisper, soft and slow, leaking through the doorframe, and a strange, ghostly blue light pouring in through the cracks. I was frozen in bed, my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. The door handle began to rattle gently at first, then more violently. And then it stopped. The light vanished. Silence swallowed the room again. Shaking, I woke my dad. When I told him, he tried to reassure me, but then suddenly raised a finger to his lips. Shh. Do you hear that? A long silence, then a soft scratching from inside the bed frame. I jumped up, dragged him out of bed, left the key on the table, and we bolted for the truck. We drove off at 2:32 a.m., never looked back. To this day, I still wonder what lived beneath that floor, and why was the motel owner so afraid of the trailer park. Story 3. The Yellow Note. A weekend getaway with my ex turned into a nightmare. After a horrible fight, I decided not to sleep in the same hotel room. Instead of paying for another expensive room, I drove a few minutes to a cheap motel, $50 a night. When I got there, the room next door was wide open. The TV was glowing blue, lighting up the entire space, but no one was inside. I entered my room. It was simple, old, like every cheap motel you've ever seen. I lay on the bed, scrolling my phone, the TV on, just for noise. But then I started hearing sounds not from the TV, but from the room next door. Muffled sounds, like arguing, or someone being silenced. Then a loud bang against the wall. I stood up and knocked on the shared wall. A moment later, bang. A harder knock came back. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and went to check. The room was still wide open. TV glowing but silent. I called out, "Is anyone in here? Do you need help?" No response. I stepped inside. The room was empty. No movement. No sound. No one. But on the glowing blue screen of the TV, I saw something stuck there. A yellow sticky note. I walked over, peeled it off. 4 scribbled words: check under the bed. I dropped the note and ran. Back in my room, I double-locked the door and called my ex to tell her what just happened. While I was explaining, a rapid series of bangs shook the wall beside me. She heard it clearly on speaker. I ran to the front desk, demanded a refund. The manager just looked at me and said calmly, "Sir, both rooms next to yours were unoccupied tonight." I insisted we check. He grabbed the key and opened the room. It was dark, TV off, no yellow note in sight. I left that night, and to this day, I still can't bring myself to imagine what might have been waiting for me under that bed. You've just heard 3 true horror stories from the kinds of roadside rooms where the line between sleep and nightmare is as thin as a curtain swaying in the night breeze. If you've ever stayed at a strange motel and experienced something you couldn't explain, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe, tap like, and ring the bell, because there are still many more terrifying tales waiting for you in the dark nights ahead. I'm Channel Name, and you've just stepped into a corner of the world we rarely speak about, but never truly leave behind.